Okay, and we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. October is Disability Employment Awareness Month. And we felt it was necessary to bring you some extra pieces of the educational series dealing with the issue of employment. So today we are really happy to be talking about the Medicaid buy-in, Medicaid expansion, and just drew a blank, the hazards of a brain injury. Mark, what's the third thing?
I was typing, sorry. What was the question?
All I could remember was
Work
Work
incentives.
incentives.
work incentives. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, the educational series is being brought to you by a group of 22 disability organizations in Nebraska. First thing I want to do is acknowledge Melanie Davis from the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, and she will be helping me in the background for this series. As I like to tell her, she does my marketing by putting links in the chat box, monitoring the chat box, and all that. We have a Dropbox, and in the Dropbox is a list of keystrokes for Zoom for people that would find it easier to use that. Melanie will put a link to the Dropbox in the chat. Depending on the device you're using, the toolbar will be at either the top or the bottom of your screen as you move the mouse around. There are 2 sign language interpreters that will be spotlighted for people that need them. Sometimes people who are using the interpreters find it easier just to pin them on their own screen so they're just all there. That's all they see. Also, another option is when people are doing presentations, there will be a bar in between the PowerPoint and the presenters. You can move that bar back and forth to make things bigger and easier to see. I want to thank the interpreters for doing this. I appreciate them. And I appreciate the captioner too. All sessions are closed captioned. To turn it on and off, you need to click on the little arrow on your toolbar beside the CC button, and then you enable subtitles. If you have any questions for the presenters, please put them in the Q&A button. Please use the Q&A button. You can just put the questions there. You can use the chat for whatever else you need to do. We will be putting these recordings on the statewide Independent Living Council's website, which is www.nesilk.org/videos. And it should come right up. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mark and let him do his thing.
Thanks, Kathy. I will proceed to do my thing. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Mark Smith. In my day job, I work as a faculty for the University of Nebraska Medical Center at the Monroe Meyer Institute University Center on Disabilities. Been here for a while. Many of you I've probably met, but for those I haven't, I'm glad that you're here. This is a topic that's near and dear for me personally outside of my work. I am the parent of a young man who receives what we would refer to as day services through Health and Human Services. He attends a private provider work setting. That has worked out very well for him. I'm also the sibling to an individual with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'm one of seven. I'm the oldest. She's the youngest. She is without getting into her personal issues, the thing that I want to say to kind of start out our discussion, I can speak, is that if even 10 or 20 years ago, you would have told me that my sister would be working in a competitive job in her community of choice, I don't know if I would have believed you, but she does, and she has been for a number of years. She was able to find a job. She has been very successful in that job with very few problems. And I think her experience and our family's experience kind of, for me at least, underlines the fact that employment is a critical discussion when we talk about disabilities across the board in the state of Nebraska. As we discuss employment this week, though, a key underlying aspect to these discussions are community inclusion, is community inclusion. Historically, disability services, and I'm speaking across disabilities, and I'm not speaking to impugn the good work done by so many individuals in Nebraska working on behalf of people with disabilities in order to support them in gaining employment. The numbers really have never been there in terms of true equity of access to competitive employment. Data collected over many years by a number of entities have consistently shown that many people who identify as having a disability can work. More so, similar data has shown that those with the capacity to work in competitive employment want to work, but there are issues there. In terms of the numbers, a recent NPR story I heard reported that the current unemployment rate in Nebraska is 2%. And you might be asking yourself, wow, that sounds kind of low. And it is low. It's a record. It's a record low level of unemployment for the state. In fact, we are the lowest state in the nation in terms of our rate of unemployment. So that sounds really good. But when we look at individuals with disabilities, the pictures change. Some of the data that I was able to sample showed that in 2020, 17.9% of persons with disabilities were employed. When we speak of persons without disabilities, that's 61.8%. So there's a clear, much higher rate of employment for persons without disabilities. And of course, 2020 was our wonderful COVID year. The unemployment rates for persons with and without disabilities both increased, 12.6, an increase of 5.3% for people with disabilities, and 7.9%, an increase of 4.4% for people without disabilities, respectively. 29% of workers with disabilities were employed part-time, compared to only 16% of those with no disability. When we talk about training for employment, persons with disabilities are much less likely to have a bachelor's degree or a higher degree. Persons with disabilities are also more likely to work in service occupations, production, transportation, material moving occupations, and are much less likely to work in management, professional, and related occupations. So we see some definite trends, and these have been very durable trends over time. Individuals with disabilities do not really have the same level of access to competitive work for a number of reasons that our presenters will talk about today and the next 2 days. Now, I did want to mention that our legislature is looking at this. In a legislative resolution, Senator Hansen introduced in this past session, he proposed an interim study to examine the financial health of individuals in the Nebraska workforce in terms of the COVID pandemic over the past year. And interestingly, the study includes, but isn't limited to, wages across the state. And that certainly includes workers who work for tips, minimum wage workers, and workers with disabilities. The study also is looking at whether income earned by Nebraska workers is adequate to afford the cost of living in Nebraska for necessities such as food and housing. And I'm thinking too that they will be also looking at healthcare as an issue. In fact, it says so later on. They will be looking at benefits to workers, such as paid sick leave, paid safe leave, health insurance and retirement benefits, as I noted, and that whether the benefits promote health, wellness, and long-term financial stability into retirement. And that finally, the legislative study looks at job opportunities available to workers across the state and whether those opportunities align with the types of jobs and benefits that workers are seeking. Today, we'll be talking about the issues of disability and employment, and in particular, access to health care, which has been, again, a barrier over time, along with other issues that impede access to employment for persons with disabilities. So that's my little bit. I hope that kind of helped set the table for our presenters. We have two presenters who, if you asked me who would I choose to introduce this topic within this series, I would have picked these two individuals. In fact, we were looking around to see, should we add anybody else? And it's like, no, they got it. So first, I want to introduce Shauna Dahlgren. Shauna Dahlgren works for Easter Seals of Nebraska. She's an employment specialist and also specializes in the area of, I can't think of what you specialize in. Sorry, didn't write that down. I will let Shauna take her introduction further. But Shauna's with Easter Seals and works in the areas of access to employment and also healthcare and employment for persons with disabilities. Also presenting today will be Brad Mearens, who is the policy director at Disability Rights Nebraska. Brad has been very active in the policy space as regards improving the prospects for individuals with disabilities as they seek competitive employment in our state. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shauna, who can tell a little bit more about herself, and look forward to hearing these presentations. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. As Mark said, my name is Shauna Dahlgren. I'm with Easter Seals, Nebraska. I've worked in the field of employment for individuals with disabilities for about 22 years now. And primarily what I do is work incentives or benefits counseling. So as Mark indicated, just in general in the space and employment for individuals with disabilities, but also specifically with individuals who receive Social Security benefits and want to work. So that's, you know, as Mark said, we're going to primarily talk about the barrier of healthcare or access to healthcare today. And so I want to go ahead and share my screen here so you can see the PowerPoint that we'll be looking at today. So as you can see from the first slide, we want to give you the idea and just share the idea that work is possible for individuals with disabilities. And while not all individuals who have a disability receive Social Security benefits, there are about 62,000 individuals that Social Security considers working age in Nebraska that receive some type of Social Security disability or SSI benefit. So we do definitely, that is a large number of folks that do have the potential to work or work more than what they're working now. So we want to just share some information that gives you an idea of what type of benefits those might be, the importance of benefits counseling services so that individuals do understand what it is that work will affect or not affect, their access to benefits and services that they need, such as healthcare, and the access to supports and services that access to healthcare might provide. So that's primarily what we're going to talk about today. And so this slide here just kind of shows you the difference between the two types of benefits that individuals can receive. So on one side, if you're looking at the slide, on the left-hand side, it talks about Social Security disability insurance, or what you might hear as SSDI, which is a benefit for an insured worker. So it's somebody who has a work history, or it's the disabled adult child of a worker. So this is a benefit that somebody gets off of their own work record or a parent's work record. And that type of benefit does provide access to Medicare, which is a certain type of healthcare coverage. And then on the other side, you can see SSI, Title 16 or SSI, which is more of a needs-based program for individuals who may have a disability and also have limited income and resources. And this type of benefit actually provides access to Medicaid, which is the state-run benefit. But either way, you can see that just getting access to this type of cash payment or being eligible for this type of benefit can provide access to healthcare that Mark was alluding to. And there are some individuals who may actually receive both types of benefits. So some individuals may actually receive both a Title II benefit and an SSI benefit, which could be access to both Medicare and Medicaid. And other individuals, even if they don't receive both types of benefits, you'll see a little bit later, we'll talk about how many individuals with disabilities can access Medicaid, even if they're not SSI eligible. But just from that little rundown, or if you've had any experience or are familiar with anybody who's received any type of benefits, whether it be Social Security disability or SSI, Medicare, Medicaid, or really any other type of benefit that may be through the federal government or the state government or even local benefits, it is really important for individuals to understand what work means or the implications of work on the benefits that they receive. Even if it just means they need to know who to report to, when to report it, and what is going to change or not going to change. That education piece is really important for people to be able to make informed choices about work. And that's really what benefits counseling is about. And so you'll see on this slide here, you know, again, just the Some of the importance of it is surrounding not only making informed choices, but also hopefully avoiding any negative implications that or unnecessary implications, I guess, like overpayments or underpayments, maybe people making crisis decisions without having all the correct information, incorrect eligibility determinations. So when we talk about Medicaid and some of those kinds of things, people tend to get a lot of notices or different things that may say they're not going to have coverage anymore, or perhaps giving incorrect information. And if they are informed about what should be or not be, then it kind of helps them navigate those issues or avoid them completely, hopefully. So to kind of change focus just a little bit, and now that we've talked about like what benefits counseling is and the importance of it, we're just going to give a little introduction to what we call work incentives. Again, not everybody that has a disability receives these types of benefits, but if somebody does receive Social Security disability or SSI benefits, it's important to know that there are work incentives available. There are supports, if you will, or incentives that make it very beneficial for a person to be working regardless of what type of benefit they have. And you'll see in the last bullet point there that it can even allow, those work incentives can even allow a person to work substantially and keep that medical insurance. So cash benefits aside, sometimes the cash benefit is not the most important thing to an individual, but that access to healthcare or the medical insurance can be vitally important. So we're going to talk first a little bit about SSI. If you're familiar with SSI at all, then you might already know that this is a benefit that is intended to pay for basic needs, really just food and shelter. So on the slide, we do have listed what we call the federal benefit rate for both 2021 and 2022. It's late enough in the year that we do have the COLA increases for the 2022 year. And so for right now, the maximum amount of SSI an individual can receive is $794 a month. And then in 2022, the maximum amount will go up to $841 for a single individual. And again, this may not sound like a lot of money, and it's really not, but it is intended to meet those basic food and shelter needs for a single individual. And then you'll also see there the resource limit of $2,000 for a single individual, which is the maximum amount of money a person can have in any combination of accounts. So it's not just each account at $2,000, but it's really any combination of accounts for $2,000 with some exceptions. So you'll see that, if you receive even the maximum amount, that's not really a lot of money to live on every month. And so it can be very beneficial to a person's bottom line to actually work. So without going into a lot of detail, I just have a slide here that kind of lists some of the main work incentives that are available to individuals who receive that SSI type of benefit. So you'll see an earned income exclusion. It is actually very beneficial to the financial piece. For a person to be working, they can make a lot more money working than they can actually receiving an SSI benefit. There are things like impairment-related work expenses, student earned income exclusion. If a person is statutorily blind, there are blind work expenses. There's plans to achieve self-support. Excuse me. And then also, maybe even most importantly, you'll see listed there's 1619B, which is the continuation of Medicaid. So again, as Mark alluded to, that healthcare can be vitally important to an individual's both medical expenses that may come up, but it can actually provide access to services like DD services or other waiver services that a person can only access through Medicaid. So you may be able to make more money by working when you receive SSI, but it's also very important oftentimes to maintain that access to Medicaid. So through 1619B, you'll see that it actually allows people to continue Medicaid eligibility, even if their cash payment goes to zero because of their earnings. So even if your SSI cash payment is reduced enough to go to zero, you can still maintain access to Medicaid with earnings below the state threshold amount. And in Nebraska for 2021, it's $44,627 a year. So again, you can see you can have some pretty substantial wages and still maintain access to the healthcare and the support services that an individual needs. And then in some cases, individuals can actually earn more than the state threshold by establishing an individualized threshold. So that can be very important. So now moving on to Social Security disability insurance, or those Title II benefits. Again, just generally speaking, this is kind of a general list of the 3 main work incentive phases for those Title II benefits, which would again be that SSDI or that CDB benefit, the benefit off of a parent's record. There's a trial work period, an extended period of eligibility, and then an expedited reinstatement period. And for somebody who is eligible for that type of benefit, if you add all these together, it can provide at least almost 9 years of sort of safety nets for an individual to try working, even work substantially, and again, potentially even maintain access to healthcare that they might need.
Excuse me, Shauna.
Yes.
We have a question in Q&A, and I'm not quite sure I totally understand it. But this is from Miguel Ross. And she wrote this when you were talking about the SSI. And she wrote, can you give an example?
Can I give an example of SSI and
That's
working?
all she wrote is, can you give an example?
Okay.
It was when you were talking about SSI.
So if that could be clarified, just in case I don't answer it, that would be good. I guess I'm assuming you're meaning.
Hold on.
Okay.
She just clarified an example of how much you can have, how much you have in accounts. You were talking about the accounts. Where they had like a $2,000 limit. And it could be up to 4 accounts with like $500 each, right?
Right. So it doesn't matter how many accounts, it just matters that there's less than $2,000 total in any combination of accounts. So if you have a checking account and and 2 savings accounts, or if you have 4 checking accounts, it doesn't matter necessarily the type of account. It just matters if there's more than $4,000 in any combination of accounts. And a lot of times that will include like retirement accounts and things like that, unless there's language that specifically can exclude them. I did mention that there are some types of accounts that are excluded, such as an ABLE account. Nebraska's ABLE program is called Enable Savings Program. So those are accounts that are specifically excluded from the resource limit. And so those can actually have more than $2,000 in them and not count against SSI or Medicaid. So let me know if that doesn't answer her question. But hopefully it will.
Oh, she wants to know, does this include what you own, a home, car, etc.?
So when we're thinking about resources and assets for SSI, we could really go down a rabbit hole and talk about it for a really long time. But generally speaking, they do not count a house that you live in, as long as you live in it, but they would count other properties that you own that you don't live in, let's say. They generally don't count one car that you own, as long as you use it to go to medical appointments, you know, and things like that. But if you own more than one vehicle, then they might count that second vehicle. So generally speaking, they won't count one home that you live in. They won't count one car that you own. But essentially they will count anything that they think you might be able to turn into cash.
Yeah, I've known people who've had to get rid of life insurance policies
Right. If you have like a universal type policy or like a whole life policy, they used to be called, where there's essentially a balance that you can take cash out, those can count as a resource. Okay. So good questions. So getting back to like the work incentive phases for Title II for Social Security Disability, or that CDB benefit off of a parent's record. Excuse me. I didn't put in here like specifically trial work levels or anything like that, because essentially during the trial work period, you can really work and earn any amount of money, and it doesn't really affect your Social Security benefit. It is important to understand that that work can still affect other types of benefits that you receive, but not specifically Social Security disability. But then once that trial work period is over, or at different kind of points in time, Social Security can look at what they call substantial gainful activity, or SGA. And that is a term that, if you're familiar with Social Security disability or work incentives, you might be familiar with that term. And so we do on this slide have the amounts for both 2021 and 2022. Listed this year, it is $1,310 per month. For 2022, it's $1,350 per month. And then there are special SGA limits for individuals who are considered statutory blind. That is $2,190 for 2021 and $2,260 for 2022. So these are amounts that Social Security looks at sort of after a trial work period is completed to determine the effect on cash benefits. But again, people can still continue to access healthcare even if their cash benefits would stop because of work. And I think that's an important point to take away from today. This again is just sort of a general list of some work incentives that are available that can actually reduce countable income. So when we talk about those SGA figures, they are not sort of, black and white or like hardline numbers. They're an income guideline, or they're an SGA guideline. And so it basically means that Social Security can sort of look at what they might call the value of a person's work, or countable earnings. And so a person can actually earn more than those numbers in gross wages and still receive a Social Security cash payment by applying some of these other work incentives. Again, just generally speaking, there's subsidy, there's unsuccessful work attempt, income averaging, and even impairment-related work expenses, to name some. But again, maybe the more important thing sometimes is that access to healthcare. So this is Title II and Medicare, and just gives you a little short sort of synopsis that indicates that an individual who receives Social Security disability, or a benefit off of a parent's record, or even a disabled widower's benefit, is entitled to Medicare after a 24-month waiting period. So there is a period of time that you have to wait in order to get access to Medicare, but there is access to Medicare after a 24-month waiting period. There are some exceptions to that. If people have certain specific conditions, there's no waiting period for Medicare, such as end-stage renal disease. Kathy mentioned, I think in her introduction, Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion isn't necessarily available to individuals who are Medicare eligible, but it can be a type of insurance that people can access during this 24-month waiting period, or if they do not have Medicare. So that's can be an important consideration for individuals. Title II beneficiaries can also qualify for Medicaid. So where we talked a little bit about those individuals that are SSI eligible and can access Medicaid directly, and then even if they start working and stop their cash payments, they can access Medicaid through 1619B. Title II beneficiaries don't have a direct tie to Medicaid, but they can be eligible for Medicaid in the state of Nebraska if they meet certain income and resource guidelines. So on this slide, there's just a couple of options mentioned. One is what they call straight Medicaid or regular Medicaid, which is 100% of the federal poverty level. Some people can access that without a spend down or a share of cost. Others access Medicaid by using a spend down or share of cost. But now, as my colleague Brad will talk about more a little bit later, Medicaid insurance for workers with disabilities is a huge work incentive for individuals with disabilities, even if they are receiving Social Security disability benefits, or even if they've worked their way off of Social Security disability benefits. And so this is a very important piece to understand, that people can actually access Medicaid, even if they're not SSI eligible. And then kind of, maybe lastly, just to share a little bit about the Ticket to Work program. Since this event this week is all about employment for individuals with disabilities who work, the Ticket to Work program is a program for Social Security disability or SSI beneficiaries. And we're talking about individuals who are eligible as an adult, and Social Security considers individuals an adult at age 18. So again, if you think back to what I mentioned earlier, there's potentially 62,000 individuals in the state of Nebraska who are receiving Social Security disability or SSI benefits within that working age group. That is potentially a lot of talent for the employers that are sometimes desperately seeking employees in Nebraska. With our unemployment rate so low, as Mark mentioned, there's a large pool of individuals that maybe are underemployed or not even employed at all that could be eligible to work in those positions or even interested. So the Ticket to Work program is just one way for individuals who receive benefits to access employment or other types of services. It is voluntary participation, so an individual can work without participating in the program, but it does allow access to supports and services in a lot of cases. And it is the beneficiary's choice who to work with. And so this is just, again, a general list of the types of services that are available through the Ticket to Work program through employment networks. And work incentives counseling and healthcare advisement, the piece that we've been talking about primarily today, can be those services that can be accessed through the Ticket to Work program. Not just the employment related services, but also understanding the implications of work and the options for continued healthcare coverage. This slide gives you the website for the Ticket to Work, the general Social Security website where you can find help. I think Melanie has probably included it in the Dropbox. There's a beneficiary worksheet that individuals can use to contact employment networks and find out what services and things that employment network provides to help them make a decision, because not all providers are the same. So there's different providers who provide different services. I did list on here the state vocational rehabilitation agencies, as they are employment networks for the Ticket to Work program. So if somebody is working with or has an active case with one of those state agencies, they are participating in the Ticket to Work program. And then there are other employment networks as well, like Easter Sales Nebraska. I guess I will say just one more point as I go back to this slide. I did include the Ticket to Work helpline on this slide. That is a helpline that people can contact if they have questions about the Ticket to Work program, who might be an appropriate provider. It also can get them access to benefits counseling services through the Work Incentives Planning and Assistance projects. Easter Sales Nebraska does have that WIPA project for both Nebraska and Kansas. And so if you contact that number, you can also not only get information about employment networks, but also get access to work incentives counseling services. And then this is just kind of a general list of the different ways that people can access benefits counseling services through Easter Sales Nebraska. So if you are working with Nebraska VR or the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, one of the state agencies, then you can access work incentives counseling services through those agencies. And then there's sort of a list of other ways that people can access those services through Easter Seals Nebraska. So essentially, regardless of whether you are working with one of those agencies or not, if you would like to find out more about anything that's been talked about today, or if you would like to find out more about the implications of work and what the options are for you to continue healthcare coverage while you're working, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. And we can get you connected wherever you need to be connected. And then the last slide is just a list of resources. So the Social Security website is on here.
Excuse me, Shauna.
Yes, Kathy?
Nita supposed to ask the question. Can you comment on how the POD program relates to work incentives?
So the Promoting Opportunity Demonstration project was a sort of a project that was going on through the Social Security Administration. It was sort of part of a research project. So it was going on for about 5 years through June of this year, through June of 2021. And Social Security essentially was kind of looking at if they adjusted certain types of benefits versus an all or nothing type of benefit, then what kind of a difference did that make in people's work efforts? So essentially they're evaluating the work incentives for the Social Security disability programs to evaluate potential changes to that. So people could sign up and enroll in that pod project for a period of time. And depending on which group they fell into, their benefits might have had some different work incentives or some different adjustments to their payments based on how much they were working. But that project ended in June of this year. So that nobody is essentially enrolled in that program anymore. But for people who did participate in that program, it's kind of a good question and a good point to bring up. For people who did participate in that program, the work incentives that are available to them now may be based on what was available to them prior to the time they enrolled in the pod project, how much they worked during the pod project, and then now at a different point in time now that that project has ended. So it would be very important for individuals to work with a work incentives counselor or with Social Security or with someone who can tell them exactly kind of where they're at now with their work incentives, what's available to them, and what the implications of work would be. So hopefully that answers the question, but if not, let me know. But again, just, I don't need to go through all the resources that are listed on here, but if you do have questions, there are some websites listed on there where you can access additional information about some of the agencies that are listed, the Ticket to Work program, and specifically the work incentives through the Social Security Red Book. And then finally, just my contact information. If anybody does have follow-up questions that don't get addressed today, or if you'd like to find out how you might be able to get connected to services that I've talked about or anything, or find out more about actual utilization of Medicaid or the new Medicaid insurance for workers with disabilities program, not new, but reformed, that Brad will talk about. I'm happy to help answer any questions and try to get you connected to resources as we can. But that being said, I guess the last thing I'll mention is, again, this is just one way for people to get access to the services and supports that they need in order to work or to make informed choices about work. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about options for continued health care while people are working. And I think the Medicaid insurance for workers with disabilities and the reform that has happened as of October 1st is just going to make it even more possible for people to choose work. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brad. I will stop sharing my screen. Are you on mute, Brad? Are you there?
Nope. Thank you, Shauna. Thank you very much. That was very enlightening. And I think that also demonstrates that there are a lot of opportunities and options available to persons with disabilities in terms of employment, going back to work, retaining employment. But I think it also highlights the need for increased awareness of what those programs are. And I think it also underscores the idea that it really would help to talk to somebody who is a benefits planner or to seek, advice and counsel of those folks who know the programs a lot better, because there seems to be a pretty high degree of complexity. So again, my name is Brad Murins, and I am the Public Policy Director at Disability Rights Nebraska. Disability Rights Nebraska is the designated protection and advocacy organization for persons with disabilities in Nebraska. Our main charge as an agency is to do just that, to advocate and protect the rights of persons with disabilities here in Nebraska. And one of the issues we've been involved in for many, many, many years now is the idea around work and healthcare. And we particularly were interested in a unique situation that persons with disabilities sometimes find themselves in, and that is the choice between employment and healthcare. And I want to talk today a little bit about a program that was instituted many years ago to try to find a solution to that question, to that choice between employment or healthcare. So let me share my screen. So the program that I want to talk a little bit about today and give you a brief overview is the Medicaid Insurance for Workers with Disabilities program. It's also known as MIWD. That's the acronym for the Medicaid Insurance for Workers with Disabilities program. And it's also known as the Medicaid buy-in program. So I'll be using those words and terms interchangeably. So let's set the stage. Setting the stage requires talking about Medicaid. Medicaid plays a vital role in the lives of many Nebraskans with disabilities. Medicaid financial eligibility is restricted to those individuals that are living or earning at or below the poverty level income. That's what we call 100% of federal poverty. That's the kind of the jargon for it. Generally, speaking, that is. And you'll notice on the right is a chart which spells out what those poverty guidelines are. And many Nebraskans with disabilities live at or below the poverty line. Thus, Medicaid often provides a more adequate array of healthcare services for persons with disabilities. In fact, more often than not, Medicaid will provide more than what may be provided in a typical private or employer-based insurance plan. The example that I've always heard or that I frequently hear is personal assistance services are covered under Medicaid, but usually are not covered under an employer-based or private health insurance plan. So you'll notice on the right is a chart. And when we talk about the poverty guidelines, we're not talking about a lot of money here. We're talking about people that are earning poverty level wages. They're not earning very much at all. And so persons with disabilities who usually are living in around those areas really rely on Medicaid quite often. Not only because it is available to them at their income rates, but also it is often a more robust array of services that meets their needs. So now that we've established the importance of Medicaid in the lives of many persons with disabilities in Nebraska, herein lies the problem.
Affected me.
Yes, Kathy?
I'm sorry.
It's okay, no problem. Healthcare becomes a work disincentive. People with disabilities in Nebraska are often caught between a rock and a hard place. Well, at least they were. I'll get to why they're maybe a little easier in a little bit. But if Nebraskans with disabilities worked and earned above poverty level, generally they risked losing their Medicaid eligibility. Because remember, generally Medicaid financial eligibility is limited to 100% of federal poverty. If you're earning that $12,000 plus something for an individual of one, that's 100% of federal poverty. So the potential loss of healthcare benefits is a significant deterrent for people with disabilities to seek employment or even simply to take a raise or a promotion. Remember, if the person makes over 100% of federal poverty, generally they become financially ineligible for Medicaid. Therein lies the rub. I think a couple of examples here, a couple of quotes I have on my slideshow, I think demonstrate the problem here. The Government Accountability Office did a report in March of 2021. They did several interviews around the country around competitive integrated employment, or CIE. In particular, the Government Accountability Office's study focused primarily and almost exclusively on the sub-minimum 14C exception to the Fair Labor Standards Act. But there was a really interesting piece in there that talked about benefits. And they said that the extent of concern that individuals or their family members have about losing public benefits, that's Medicaid, if the individual's earnings increase, and that increase would affect that individual's transition to competitive integrated employment. And they followed up by saying 8 individuals that they interviewed out of 17 considered the idea of the potential loss of benefits to be a most important factor determining whether or not an individual will transition to competitive integrated employment. I take this as extending beyond just whether or not the person is making minimum wage or sub-minimum wage. I think this also indicates that the importance of benefits counseling, and also indicates that this idea of losing benefits and losing healthcare is one of those major deterrents, whether or not the person's transitioning from a 14C program where they're paid sub-minimum wage, or if they're trying to transition from no employment to employment, or transitioning from certain number of dollars an hour to a higher level because they got a promotion. Remember that healthcare loss is a major disincentive. And there was a recent article in The Reader out of Omaha interviewed Michael Warner about his experiences around seeking employment. And he was talking about his experience was he can't work more than 4 hours per week and keep his benefits. And remember, Michael has an associate's degree and wants to work full time, but his need for healthcare, since it's tied to Medicaid and those other Social Security benefits, is limited to, in his example, 4 hours per week. That's a major disincentive, and ultimately puts people with disabilities into forced dependency. Either You stay on Medicaid and don't go to work, or you go to work, make some good money, but guess what? You now lose your health care. And the health care that you are provided either through your employer or that you might be able to acquire through the private health insurance market might not meet your needs if you can afford it. Because remember what Mark was saying earlier, the number of persons with disabilities that are working in part-time employment or are working in lower wage employment opportunities plays a role here. So what's the resolution to the problem? Well, one of the solutions to the problem was the Medicaid Insurance for Workers with Disabilities program, or MIWD. This program was created in 1999 to allow Nebraskans with disabilities who are employed to retain or qualify for their Medicaid coverage. Now this, I guess I should back up. This program was allowed under federal law, the Balanced Budget Act, and then Nebraska and other states took that initiative and developed their own Medicaid buy-in or MIWD programs. Each state is different in the makeup and the categories and a variety of the percentages and dollar figures and those sort of things. But they're allowable under federal Medicaid law. So in this particular program, Nebraska's MIWD program, here are some interesting characteristics. Individuals could earn up to 2.5 times the poverty rate, or as we call it in the vernacular, 250% of federal poverty, and still be on the program. However, individuals that are earning or were earning between 2 and 2.5 times the poverty rate would pay a monthly premium amount back to the state of Nebraska, sort of akin to paying your health insurance premium if you were on an employer-based or private health insurance plan. And under the 1999 version of the MIWD program here in Nebraska, that premium amount would be anywhere between 2% and 10% of their income. I do believe it's their earned income. Shauna, I will defer to Shauna if I'm incorrect. She can certainly correct me. In 1999, when Nebraska developed and instituted this program, they planned for about 99 to 100 people to participate. In 2019, the number of people on the program was about 74, with only 2 people that were paying a premium. Nebraska's program had not been modified since 1999, despite the fact that many other states had revamped their programs with the subsequent federal ticket to work legislation that was passed in the 2000s. Nebraska has, or at that time, had not. Benefits planners that identified that one of the eligibility tests under this 1999 version Nebraska had been working with, we call it Test A. Well, this eligibility test, Test A, was identified as a consistent and major barrier impediment to people with disabilities seeking employment. Often, this Test A was the place where people with disabilities who wanted to enter and participate in the MIWD program, that's often where they failed and then were excluded from participation. That's one of the reasons why there was only 74 people on the program, even though in 1999, some 20, almost 30 years later, they had anticipated about 25 more people. So that was the impetus behind legislation in 2019, 2020. Legislative Bill 323 by Senator Sue Crawford of Omaha, was passed which would make changes to the program, the MIWD program, effective October 1st, 2021. Highlights of those changes are, it changed the income tests. It basically removed, the legislation removed test A. It also removed the trial work period requirement. The legislation created two eligibility groups, which is what the ticket to work version of these programs around the country. That ticket to work version allows for the creation of those two different groups, the basic coverage group and the medically improved group. And we'll get into those in a little bit. Just put a pin in that. And the legislation also lowered the buy-in premiums from 2 to 10%. Now, under this bill or legislation 323, would reduce that to 2% to 7.5%. And we anticipate that these changes will allow more people to qualify for and maintain their Medicaid benefits through the MIWD Work Incentive Program. I think a couple of quotes I think are particularly illustrative here. Unfortunately, most applicants fail test A. It's not about the amount of the person's income, but the unreasonable limited set of circumstances that a person must meet in order to pass test A. Those unreasonable circumstances cause most people to fail. And differing interpretations of terminology by Nebraska and Social Security, specifically the interpretation of a trial work period, also was a barrier. It restricted program eligibility and caused confusion and unnecessary burden administratively. Again, those are the two main reasons why we have sought for many, many years to make reforms to the MIWD program. The MIWD program is a great opportunity when it works most effectively. And we were arguing for many years, almost 20 years now, that the way it's interpreted and the operation is outdated. It needs to be updated, reformed so that it can actually be more effective. And if you look at the surrounding states of Nebraska, we're not the only ones that have a program like this. Kansas has a very developed and robust MIWD program. They have thousands of people on their program. Iowa has a program. They have significantly more people on their program than we do and have. So all of our surrounding states are doing better across the board than we are. At least we were. We hope that these reforms in LB 323 will help fix that situation. So let's get back to the coverage groups. Now, again, I don't intend to give you the full microscopic, granular, detailed, line by line, issue by issue breakdown of the MIWD program. I just kind of want to give you a sense of what the program is, what it does, and hopefully that will give you a good sense that maybe it might fit for you. And you could, or someone might want to give Shauna a call and see how this program could benefit you. So the two major groups that were created under this reformed operation of LB 323 are the basic coverage group and the medically improved group. The basic coverage group operates between 101 and 250% of federal poverty. They have to have resource limits. They have to be between 16 and 65, have earned income, and they have to meet the Social Security Administration disability criteria, which you can find on the website that I've linked at the bottom of this slide. So basic coverage. Medically improved criteria group are people that meet all the criteria in the basic coverage group. That is, that they have the income restriction, they have the asset restrictions, the age restriction, earned income, and they meet the definition of disability. However, if a person is working and is maintaining their healthcare regimen, their healthcare or their health situation might improve such that their disability has been lessened a little bit. hasn't maybe been erased, but it's been lessened. Those folks are considered the medically improved. So they meet all the basic coverage group criteria. Their employment is defined as earning the minimum wage, and they have to be employed 40 hours per month, and that they have to be previously enrolled in the basic coverage group, but due to their improved health status, they have lost their coverage of the basic coverage criteria based on their better health care. It decreases the disabling condition. Those folks are in this medically improved criteria. Again, trying to increase the participation of folks with disabilities, whether they are medically improved or not. Some additional information I thought was interesting or pertinent. The Nebraska Health and Human Services webpage, they have developed their own independent webpage
Brad,
on. Yes.
could you please give an example of medically improved?
Oh, sure. Well, I think it's if you had a disability and you were taking a regimen of medications, and your breathing disability improved because you were taking your medications, or you had you had acquired some technology or some equipment that helped you improve so that your condition is no longer as disabling as it was. It's kind of a gray area. I would actually defer to Shauna for a more particular example. But the idea is that there are those people who might be taking medications, might be doing their healthcare regimen, and their healthcare situation improves a little bit, or improves such that their disability is not as disabling as it would be if they were in the basic coverage group. Does that kind of get at your question? You get the question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Okay. And I've got like 2 more slides, and then if Shauna wants to jump in and give an example, I will certainly create space for her. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that the Health and Human Services has Nebraska Health and Human Services has a page dedicated to the MIWD program that's linked in here, and it's a great source of information. I thought 2 pieces that were on the website were particularly important. They say that the benefits. So one of the questions is, are the benefits the same under MIWD and straight up Medicaid? And the answer is yes. The Medicaid benefits are the same, whether you're participating in the MIWD program or you've gone on Medicaid through other means. And that there's no separate application. The application for Medicaid, you fill that out, and the staff will determine whether or not you would be eligible for the MIWD program. I also want to give praise and thanks. And I would be remiss if I did not do this. The Medicaid division has been very supportive and eager to collaborate with the disability community and the advocates that have been pushing for this reform. And they've been really helpful in making this reform a reality, as well as working with our groups to raise awareness and promote the program so more Nebraska disabilities can work. They've been very eager, and I have to give them praise. And again, I think we need to give a huge thank you to Senator Sue Crawford for listening to us, taking up our issue, acting on it, and championing this bill from inception to passage. This has been many, many, many years in the making. And I think Kathy can attest to that as well. As I recall, when I first started working in this area around in 2001, Kathy and I were having conversations about this particular program. We've addressed the issue several times in the legislature, but it didn't go anywhere. It didn't get a lot of traction. So in some 20 years in the making, we finally got some traction. Thank you to Senator Sue Crawford for, like I said, listening, acting, and championing this bill. we're really excited and eager to see the results and the outcomes of this bill. We really do think this will help persons with disabilities gain, retain, and advance in their employment. A couple of parting thoughts. There was again, going back to the Reader article, I think there's some really good points in here. Ian Fromming talks about how you must understand the system better than the system understands itself. And he's a benefits planner. I think the point with that is that, again, underlines the importance of talking to your benefits planners and getting benefits counseling. Those are the folks that will know the ins and outs and what other things might be out there that you might be eligible for. And I think also, in the article, it talks about once advocates or individuals figure out the system, talk to Easter Seals and your benefits planners. Everyone's benefits and employments will be different and unique, and you shouldn't assume that someone's experience will match yours. Again, underlining the importance of knowing what programs are out there, reaching out to those folks that know the programs and how they operate, and seeking that counseling to see what benefits are out there for you and what you might be eligible for. And with that, I would open up to any questions. And if Shauna has an example that she would like to use, I'd be happy to give her some space.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a specific example necessarily, other than to say, there are a lot of ways that Health and Human Services in the past has looked at what they call, quote, medical improvement. And sometimes it has to, or looking at somebody who may be considered, quote, no longer disabled. So sometimes it does have to do with certain determinations that are made by the Social Security Administration that are not necessarily medically related, but maybe more work related. And so when we're looking at the proposed regulations and now the regulations that have become effective October 1st, some of it, I think, will we'll be able to answer some of those questions more specifically, maybe over time, because the details of the language in the statutes or in the regulations are not necessarily clear enough for us to define exactly what that might look like or what that might mean in one situation or another. So I know that, Brad and myself and Edison with the Arc of Nebraska and some other disability advocates, are still having conversations with health and the Department of Health and Human Services, because we've, proposed some questions about what, certain pieces that Brad has talked about, and then other pieces of the regulations where we've asked them to sort of interpret or give a more clarifying information about what would or wouldn't happen in certain situations. And I think we're just going to have to work through some of that. I guess the bottom line is I don't think they have all the answers yet. Whenever you're implementing something new, there's a lot of guidelines and pieces that sort of have to fit together. And so it may just be as certain cases come up and bring issues to light that we'll find the need to address any issues that become a pattern of challenge or barrier or anything like that. But like Brad had indicated, really for any type of disability, medical improvement might look different. It might be based on medications or treatments that a person receives that have now allowed them to be stable enough to work, or even work substantially. It could be somebody who, maybe had cancer and has now gone into remission. It could be somebody who maybe needed a transplant and now has, received that transplant and become a little bit more stable. So medical improvement could look different just depending on the type of disability and the impairment. But the point is that this group has not specifically been identified before, as far as the medically improved group has not specifically been identified as being able to be covered in the state of Nebraska, and now it is. So I think it leaves open just a big area or big opening, I guess, for individuals with all types of disabilities to work substantially, work at all, work more than they've been working, look at careers and moving forward, and still potentially be able to have access to that critical healthcare and sometimes necessary life essential services and supports that they can't get anywhere else.
Does anybody have any more questions?
I just see your comment in there, Dawn. I'm not sure. When you say they have to be careful, can you just clarify that maybe a little bit? The Department of Health and Human Services. Yeah, I think I see what you're getting at there. Yeah, I mean, you know, my experience, you know, in the past has been there is something called the state review team. So even if individuals don't have a Social Security determination of disability, they may be able to get a determination of disability through the state review team, through the Department of Health and Human Services. So those definitions can look, you know, a little bit different between Social Security and Health and Human Services, or as far as how the language is interpreted anyway. So yes, we'll have to see how the department makes eligibility determinations on some cases. And again, you know, with all of us advocates sort of working together and having the conversations, we can, you know, it helps us identify where there are gaps or where there are challenges when something like this is implemented, so that we can collaboratively go to the department and say, hey, this is not just an issue for one person, but it is an issue for multiple people. And it sort of helps in that conversation that we have such a great group of advocates that we all, you know, work together and try to bring these issues to light so we can get some movement on those.
And I would just extend that too, is that, you know, if you're experiencing issues or you're, you know, having barriers, contact some of that, you know, one of the advocates here. We've got a really good working relationship with the departments, and we're in conversations with them. So I think we can, you know, easily, you know, bring up your issues or things that you're seeing on the ground level that the folks, that advocates and that the department needs to know about. So don't be afraid to speak up or speak out. Let us know how it's working, how it's not working, and maybe we can help send messages back and forth and find solutions.
Mark, do you have anything more to add?
No, I just want to thank everybody for that attended today, and really appreciate the questions. Really appreciate Melanie's work kind of behind the scenes, and appreciate Brad and Shauna's thoughtful and informative commentary. So.
All right, well, I would like to thank everybody that attended, and I would like to thank our presenters for doing such a great job. But our celebration of Disability Employment Awareness Month continues for 2 more days. So tomorrow on the 27th, we'll be talking about disability employment and person-centered planning. Then on the 28th, we're going to be talking about supported employment and some of the other supports that people could possibly get that they might need to help their work. And these will both sessions start at 1 o'clock. I believe Melanie put in the list into the chat feature the link to register for tomorrow. So I hope you can get that. And I want to thank you all for coming. If you need to get a hold of me, if you think of an idea for a future training, you can contact me at Kathy@nesilc.org, or you can contact any of the organizations that are involved with putting this together. You do have to register for each session, but I hope you will join us again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody.